Welcome to USA Global TV and Radio, where our mission is to provide education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. USA Global TV and Radio connects you with experts and audiences all around the world every single day to help you succeed in business and to live a richer life. Visit us at usaglobaltv.com to learn about career and life-changing training and mentoring programs like the Listening Mentor. Subscribe to our newsletter to stay informed about our special programs and offers. Discover how you can become a guest on one of our shows or a host or producer of a USA Global TV and Radio show of your very own. That's USA Global TV and Radio, where the doctor is always in.
Hello and welcome to all of our viewers and listeners from around the world. This is USA Global TV and Radio. I'm Dr. Jacalyn Kerbeck, and our show today is stories of hope, inspiration, and overcoming adversity. Our topic is when isolation turns into progress. Who is going to lead us through this discussion? It's the star of our show. It's Mr. Doug Lawrence. Let's welcome him to the program. Hi, Doug.
Hello, and hello to our listening and viewing audience around the world. Thank you for taking time to join us today. And if you're not able to join us, please make sure that you check out our YouTube channel, and you'll find today's episode will be there for your listening pleasure when you're ready to listen.
Such a great point, Doug. When you're ready. Many times in life, we have opportunities, but we're not ready. We might run from them. We might just turn our ears off. We don't want to listen to them. And sometimes we even go into isolation, whether it's because of an opportunity or it's because of news that we didn't want to receive, we don't want to process. So when I say the word isolation to you, Doug, do you have negative thoughts or positive thoughts coming up for you?
I'm kind of one of those people that always looks for the positive versus the negative. And so I see all of those things. So even if somebody, if you were to say, framed it around the topic of isolation, I would see that as a learning opportunity. And I would work my way through that to be able to say, okay, if it is in fact a learning opportunity, what does me being in isolation for a period of time, what does that do for us? And I think that when we think about the term isolation, I know for me, it immediately takes me to the aspect of COVID and people being in the hospital and being isolated from loved ones because of the restrictions on visitations and all of that. And so for me, that's where I go, and that's probably the one spot that I really have to dig deep to find a way to make that become something positive.
I can appreciate what you're saying, Doug. And I'm also thinking to myself that I've heard this numerous times when I got divorced. You need to take some time and be by yourself. How many times do we hear this? You need to do this by yourself. You need to learn to be by yourself before you can be with anyone else. So at what point in your experience as an international certified mentor working with people all over the world, when is that need to be alone turn into something a little more concerning?
I think that part of it is mindset, is that, you can, it can be something that is totally debilitating for you. You don't know how to deal with it. You become depressed. You have all kinds of anxiety and all of that simply from the fact that, you're isolated and you were put in that position by somebody else that you had no control over that particular situation. So I keep thinking of, when my wife Deborah was in the hospital, and there was probably about a 2-week time period where no visits whatsoever. And we had to come up with ways to be able to communicate and stay in touch. And, we did lots of FaceTime, with the phone, and that was how we were able to deal with it. But, that was not without it taking its toll. Certainly, I know on me, and very much so on Deborah, because she's kind of the image of the positive image of somebody that can make a good thing out of something that's not so good. And she did that. She was the one that would stay positive, for the benefit of the rest of us.
Thanks again for sharing that confidential information, personal information, because that really helps other people put things in perspective. We just had a great interview with someone, Dr. Rana, who shared about her diagnosis with breast cancer. And I can only imagine how isolating that must have felt. Yet she was able to put her fears aside, deal with them, put them aside, and start a new business. So even from being forced to being isolated because you're receiving some type of medical treatment, the mind, the spirit continues on if you have that passion and drive. Do you think that exists in all people, Doug?
I think it's there, but I don't know that we utilize it to our benefit. And the other thing that I wanted to throw out was the idea of, she was talking about her experiences in dealing with breast cancer and all of that, but she had already gone through a horrific set of experiences with, I think it was 5 years in a war-torn country where, they were basically isolated. Because I remember at one point she had mentioned that they weren't allowed to go out, to go outside. And, that's the word, that's isolation by itself. And so it was, I found that she had a lot of her depth and wealth of experience as it relates to going through, different stages and different periods of isolation was so powerful that, I could have listened to her for hours.
You know what else is also interesting? I agree with what you're sharing there, is when you think about people who go on hunger strikes. Okay, they're not going to eat anymore, or they're protesting something in silence. And not only have they deprived themselves of being with other people, in this case, they've deprived themselves of food. And we're just talking about how important food is. So I'm wondering, in this mode of isolation, if we can have the creature comforts of home, whatever they might be to you or to me, does that help diminish the emotional impacts of the isolation?
I'm going to say most definitely. I think that it would help diminish, the feelings and that you would go through. I've never gone through and done a hunger strike or even a fasting of any significance. I think I've done maybe a day of fasting, and it's interesting because you actually, by making that decision or that choice in a change in your lifestyle, what you're basically doing is creating the environment for self-isolation. Because if you're going to fast, you want to eliminate or diminish as much as you can interaction with other people who are definitely not fasting, and they're eating whatever they feel like eating. And that's a trigger for you, because then it starts you starting to think, oh, I wonder, gee, that looks really good. I'll bet you that I could maybe just take a little bite. And you've created the isolation for a reason. You need to follow through on it.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because you have to have that will to keep going. I know I just fasted for 31 hours because I was driving. And I have to tell you that at at minute 31:01, I did not feel well. And I said to myself, I am not doing this again. And I think that sometimes they're the lessons that we learn. So, in other words, if I had fasted for 16 hours like I normally do, that's one thing. But to go 31, too much. Maybe being isolated for an hour, for a day, for a couple of days, a weekend, maybe that's enough, as opposed to just deciding to go out into the woods and be there for 6 months alone. I know people do that to write and to find creativity. And I know you have some experience with this as well.
I did. I made a decision. I hit the wall, so to speak, and I was trying to kickstart my next book and to get it off the ground. And I went through all my normal regimes. I scheduled time to actually sit in front of the computer and write. And that just, I hit a block. I wasn't going anywhere with that. And so I finally, I said, well, I've never done this before, so I'm going to give it a try. I'm going to literally pack a bag and go away, hop in my vehicle and go away. And I went to this small little town, city, whatever, right in the base of the mountains. There's ski hills around. There was all these golf courses and all kinds of different things. But what was important for me was that it was also my first place that I was stationed as a married person with Deborah. That was our first posting, is what we called them. And I went there with the idea in mind of not doing anything at all other than sitting down and starting to write. And what I found was, because of isolating myself from everybody and everything around me, and I focused on writing, I set aside probably 4 to 6 hours a day to do the writing, that I was able to achieve the purpose, which was I got, I think, about 20 or between 20 and 30 pages written. And for me, that made it a success. So, part of that requires discipline, but it also requires you to be open to actually being isolated and trying to be as diligent as you possibly can and fulfilling why you're, the reason why you're there.
I'm wondering also, Doug, in the story that you just shared, when you were out there and you were doing your thing, was that a time when maybe some feelings and thoughts started popping up, that maybe things that you didn't even really think about in the past, maybe memories or dreams that you have, and all of a sudden they're kind of swirling around. They're like, hey, Doug, deal with us.
Yeah, there was lots of that. There was lots of dreams. There was, I went there with the idea in mind of being able to get away from everything. And I had, as I call it, company. So I had visitations in the wee hours of the morning from the spirit world. And I had to deal with that in order for me to be able to get up the next morning, and for me to be able to do what I sort of, to fulfill the purpose or the reason why I was there.
Life is very interesting, isn't it? How things come to us, we hear things, we see things, we experience things. But when we're not alone and we are in the midst of our daily life, our daily grind, our daily passion, whatever it might be, we don't often take the time away, even 15 minutes, to just be with our thoughts and be with our feelings and our emotions and see what's coming up. And what can happen as a result of not doing that?
Well, I think you basically shut down emotionally, or you can shut down emotionally, because I know for me, to experience a lot of what I experience, I have to be present, number one, but I also have to be very open to whatever is coming my way, and to be able to sort of understand or appreciate why it is coming my way so that I'm able to take advantage of or make good use of what it is that what I'm being told. And that's probably the best way to describe it.
I want to also share, because you and I discussed this before, is that isolation can exist in our mind even when we're in a group, we're actually with people, but inside we feel isolated.
And I think that's part of the grieving process for sure, is that, you end up, you do feel isolated. So a group setting on the weekend, I was invited to an event, a celebration of sorts, and there were times where it's a big gathering. There was probably close to 30 plus people, and there were times during the evening when I stayed there. There was times during the evening that I did feel that I was isolated, and what that ended up doing was then that caused me to reflect back. That was some triggers of things that had happened in my life before that, things that had happened with my wife Deborah, and I cut my time at the gathering, at the celebration. I cut my time short because I just felt that I felt, number one, isolated, because I was in a couples environment for the most part, a couples environment as a single person. And for me, that typically causes me to revisit my grief, and actually causes me to think about, okay, this triggers you, then what can you do to sort of to mitigate it from becoming a trigger that you absolutely cannot deal with, and you don't know how you're going to get around it in any way.
And that's where the work begins, when we don't know. We don't know. And I appreciate what you just shared, because it is difficult what you're going through. It's new pages in a book that you thought was already written, right? And they're pages that you didn't want to have to read, that you didn't even want to be in the book, but yet you have to power on, so to speak. You have to find the ways to motivate yourself, because you're spending so much time helping other people that you don't want to get lost in that and lose Doug, right?
Yeah. And it's also, I can understand now why people would say, just, it's time for you to move on, but it's not time yet. It's just, I'll know when I've moved on. And, from my perspective, I don't know if we ever completely, fully move on. I think there's going to be remnants of our past life that sort of stays with us, and we have to deal with that. So, but I can see now, having made the statements that I've made this morning, that I could see where people, close personal friends, and that could become frustrated with, here we go again. He's obviously experiencing the isolation trip again, and why doesn't he just move on? Let's get on with life. But there's so many different variables that we have to deal with, that we have to manage before it manages us. And so, it's not as simple as, get over it, buttercup, and move on. There's a lot of pieces to the puzzle that we need to be able to address.
And again, I'm just so touched that you continue to be so real with us, because that's what's important. You are a real person experiencing real feelings, and every day something different is presenting itself, and you had a wonderful, beautiful partner and the love of your life with you, and now it's just you there, and that is isolating. Absolutely.
Well, and it is isolating partly because of the fact, I think, that society as a whole is very much a couples society, and anyone who is not so, doesn't have a partner to go through all these different great life experiences is somebody who can in fact become isolated and struggles to reach out and find someone that they can actually maybe get back into doing things as a couple. It's going to take time, I know that, but how much time?
We don't have that answer, do we?
Nope.
No. And I've shared this with you before, and I've shared it here, and I'll just again, is that even though I'm a public figure and I'm here in the public domain, I question all the time how I feel isolated. I just left Florida. I felt isolated there. Now I feel isolated here. And you wonder, is it in your mind or is it actually real? But I think that when you are someone who is a people person and you're used to being around people and socializing, and then you're not, it is a different experience. And as we know from talking to Dr. Rana just before on the other show, is that there is true value in having these mediums, this technology, because we are able to communicate across the world. In addition, we still need to create relationships in person, I feel, because there's a need for both. What do you think?
No, I agree. And just to sort of add a little bit extra to what you're saying is, from a grief perspective, and I know we went through this because we had multiple moves or relocations or transfers when I was in the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, and we didn't know it, but now I better understand what grief's all about. Every time we got moved, we had to go and pack everything up and head to a new location that I was going to be my new place of work. There was sadness that we had to be able to figure out to deal with the environment that we were being behind. And it was more difficult I had my work in, and I had the people that I worked with. So for me, the transition wasn't as difficult, but for Deborah and the children, it was, okay, that's it, say goodbye and load everybody up, and we start anew. And it was very difficult, to be able to build those relationships so that you felt comfortable and, trusting of the new people in your life. And so it takes work to be able to do that. And, for me, I think the whole aspect of that is that every time you take a look at things from a different perspective, there's elements of grief in that are there.
Very true. I want to give an example of a time very recently when I felt isolated, and I really feel like there was divine intervention from the universe. I truly believe it exists. But my mom and I were in the car driving on I-95, which is a major highway, north-south in the United States. And the whole car just started shaking. You imagine you're going 75 miles an hour and the whole thing starts shaking. And I thought, I can't believe this is happening, because a similar thing happened on the way from New Jersey to Florida in October. And I had the whole car serviced, thousands of dollars. Anyway, I had to pull off the road because it wasn't just me. It's also responsible for my mother and also for anybody else that I don't know what the car is going to do, if it's going to go out of control. And so on the flashers, had to go 30 miles to get to the hotel we were going to. Anyway, long story short, it was Saturday night that just passed. And the next day was Mother's Day. It was also Sunday. Who's going to service the car? So I felt so alone because I have this responsibility to take care of my mom. and to get back on the road and to get here so I can broadcast on Monday. And so I put it to the universe and I said, I'm only one person. I don't know what the answers are because everything I checked on Google, nobody's open, dealership not open until Monday. And it's an amazing, I happened to the next day get in the car to go to a service center, maybe 3 hours away. I didn't even know how I'd make it. And I look over the hill and there's a Walmart auto service center. And they took us right in. There was no line. And they had not one, but 2 tires, which are very unusual tires on this car. They had both of them and they put them both on in less than 30 minutes. It was divine intervention, Doug. I'm telling you. So I went from isolation and just giving it up, saying, please, can you please help? So my point is, our title is When Isolation Turns into Progress. Maybe sometimes if we put it out to God, source, the universe, whomever, whatever, that there are answers there that we wouldn't have if we just stayed stuck in our rut.
And I cannot agree more with you on that particular topic, because and what I encourage the people that I spend time with in a mentoring relationship is to not close that door, the spiritual side of things, and to like you said, put it out there and ask for divine intervention to be able to say, I don't know where to go. I don't know which direction to turn, but please give me the guidance that I need in order to make the right decision that you want me to make.
Exactly. And sometimes people think that I'm silly or foolish when I say I'm putting it out to the universe, but I'm telling you, I don't think you can have a list of 80 things that you want. What is it that you really want? What is it that's really important to you? And you're asking for some help, some guidance. Sometimes it's clearing the clutter from our brain so we can think clearly to figure out what's the solution to get from where we are to where we want to go.
And I think that's one thing too that's really important, is clearing the clutter out of the brain so that you're able to hear the message that is, that's coming your way, as far as, when you ask for divine intervention. It's very difficult for the answer to come through when you've got all kinds of chatter going on, in your brain, and you need to clear that. You need to make sure that that's gone, and then just be open to, to hear things. And it's going to, because if you have a sense or a feeling of isolation, that's going to preclude any messaging whatsoever from coming through to you. So you do need to make sure that, you've addressed that and cleared the pathway for that messaging to come through.
That's such a great word term, clearing of memories that don't serve us, clearing. I don't know. I think this is true also of dreams that aren't really in alignment with our purpose. And, I could say to you that I want to be a rock star. I don't think so. I like to sing. I can play the piano, but that's not where I'm meant to go. So I feel like we only have so much space in our brains. And I actually saw a show on this, and I can't think of what it was, but there were 2 heads, and they were, dummy heads, and they were cut open, and there were 2 brains. And in the man's brain, there were all these compartments, almost like a sock drawer that, you put the socks here, there. And the women's brain, there were wires going all over the place. And it was just interesting because, and I don't even know if you think this is true, Doug, but I really feel like from the relationships I've had with men, they will put me in this box over here, and then they're onto other boxes. But if we are able to look at what are in those boxes, or if it's the women, all those wires, do we need all those wires? I mean, can we maybe combine a couple? I think we're able to be much more productive. And I feel like that productivity can also equate to a sense of purpose, and also letting go of some things that don't serve us because they're not in our purpose.
And I think when you go down that path where you allow all kinds of different things in there, it does end up sort of muddying the waters as far as number one, understanding what your purpose is, and number two, being able to fulfill or live up to what your purpose is. So, I take a look at, and I've validated this time and time and time again, but my purpose in life, as it's been stated, is that I'm a healer, and I went through, past life regression, and was able to, with the hypnotherapist that I did that with, I was able to determine that in every single past life that we visited, that was the role or the function that I played. And so it was the validation that I was searching for, to be able to say, okay, now it's full speed ahead. I know what my purpose is. I know the intent that I'm here to fulfill, and to be able to do that, versus allowing myself to have all kinds of chatter going on and lots of clutter in the brain, and not being open to hearing any other messaging or basically any other messaging, and not being able to live up to that purpose. You let those opportunities get away on you.
Absolutely true. And I think also when we think about opportunity, I like to think also of expectations and how they align or don't align with progress. And what I mean by this is, maybe you did something, let's say you're going to write another book, and you wrote 3 pages today, and you're sharing with somebody else who's not a writer or an author, and they're like, 3 pages, Doug? That's what you spent? You were there 2 hours? You spent that time doing 3 pages? Other people's expectations of your progress can have an impact where you feel like you need to take a step back, and maybe you need to isolate because you're getting all this negative feedback.
Or you need to change how you go about writing. And what I mean by that is, I went where, because I did the retreat where I went into the mountains, did the writing, came back, did a little bit more writing, and then I hit another wall. And what I did was, I found that maybe if I record, so if I'm thinking as I'm thinking, instead of trying to do the writing in that, which seemed obviously was the root cause, was then why not try and record it. So as I would sit down, or if all of a sudden the mood struck me, I had some things I wanted to capture, I'd sit down, power up my laptop, and start recording as I was speaking. And I found that was actually quite beneficial and seemed to work really well.
Another great tip that you just shared there. Fantastic. When you are writing, do you get opportunities where you feel stuck, and that's sort of an isolation as well?
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Because what happens is it ends up that you're writing, you become stuck. So then your purpose, so part of, my purpose is to be a healer, and part of being a healer is to be able to share your lived experiences with others. And so now all of a sudden, because I'm stuck, I'm not able to fulfill or live up to that particular, to be able to deal with the different things that I want to be able to capture in the context of the book, and to be able to move that part of that forward in a logical manner.
Thanks again, Doug. I want to share something also that I would love to have your professional opinion about this. But when I was in Florida, I was going to my workout, which I'm not going to say what it is, but people see on Facebook what it is, where I was going every single day. And one of the last classes, I just found tears falling out of my eyes. And I thought it was because I was sad that I wasn't going to be able to do the workout anymore. But upon reflecting later, I realized that during the pandemic, I didn't have an opportunity to go there either because there weren't any where I am here in New Jersey. And I realized the reason why I started to cry was because I had taken all of the pain of being isolated and I put it into the workout. All of the pain of being alone and dealing with certain situations, I put it into the workout, and now the workout wasn't there anymore. And so that is what I think was coming up for me. It was that, what was I going to do with the pain of the isolation now?
Yeah, you basically had the workouts were part of your coping mechanisms to be able to deal with it, and now that was being taken away. And
Exactly.
yeah, and you haven't had the time to be able to figure out, okay, now what do I do, or what can I do? So
Exactly. It was kind of an aha moment, but it was also, from an intellectual perspective, it was one way, but from an emotional perspective, fear was coming up again. And of course, then getting in the car and driving for 2 days and setting up the studio. So there's no new pattern of behavior that I've put into place. So I'm kind of in that limbo stage, and that's okay, because I think that's where growth can take place. And I've always been black and white, but there is gray, and I have to learn to be more in the gray.
and the other part of it all is that it's you have to give yourself the time. It's almost like a grieving process. You're going to grieve the loss of where you were before and what all the things were, and then you're going to take a look and be able to say, okay, what did I learn from this, and what are some things that I may want to do differently, and then going forward, what does that look like, in its fullest bloom, so to speak, and be able to move forward with that, because you know what you need to have as part of your coping mechanisms. It's just a matter of now of collecting the pieces and pulling it all together.
And I thank you, Doug. I want to follow up from that with another question, which is, how many coping mechanisms do we need? Do we need any?
I'm going to go way out on a limb, and I'm going to say that we do need coping mechanisms. Can we do without them? It depends on the situation, but from what I've seen, certainly from my own personal experiences, I would be lost without having different approaches to dealing with different things in my life. And I'm going to suggest that it's probably that way for most of us. We can choose to not, and I have a concern or a fear that if I choose to not have any coping mechanisms, I'm going to have all these different things building up, and I'm not doing myself any favors by just kind of pushing it in and pushing it down and keeping it bottled up inside, versus coming up with a coping strategy to deal with it, to get it out and kind of on the table, so to speak, so that I can move forward from that point.
I'm always just so much in awe of how much work we have to do and how often we have to do it. Do you believe, Doug, in just saying, you know what, I'm taking a month and I'm not doing anything? I'm just going to take a month. Maybe I'm going to go on a beach. I'm going to make sandals out of palm leaves. I don't know. Have you ever thought that would be a constructive way to spend time?
Well, I do, because I do think that every so often we need to, it's personal care. It's me time, as I call it, me time. And I need to hop in my vehicle, if that's the chosen path, and just go someplace away. And it may be for half a day, it may be for a day, it may be for 2 weeks, who knows? But it's a matter of I need to, because actually what we're trying to accomplish here is we're trying to break that isolation medium, and to be able to to do so, I need to come up with a idea, strategy, whatever we want to call it, to go away and not do anything. I was going to suggest take a book, but I've done that too, where I've taken a book and left it in my suitcase, and because when I got to where I was going, that was not on my list of favored things to do, and it was simply, sitting in a beach chair by the water and just gazing out across the water. Something as simple as that.
Oh, that sounds so fabulous, Doug. I think I shared this with you. We're 4 blocks from the beach, and I haven't been there in probably 3 years. So we have to take the time, because in that case, like for isolation, being in a chair with the ocean crashing over your feet, it's such a beautiful experience. You don't need anyone else to do that. You don't need any conversation. That is, in fact, I'm putting that on my list, Doug. You just convinced me.
It's therapeutic, very therapeutic.
And that the ocean water, as long as it's not filled with medical waste, that's salt water. It's just the salt air. It's just beautiful. So I hope everyone finds ways for turning their isolation, because we all feel isolated, whether we are or not, for a long period of time, how to turn that into progress. And Doug, you're here to help tell people how.
So, if you want to have this conversation like we've been having here today, I also encourage you to go to our YouTube channel and listen once again to the messages and that we shared today. Having said that, you can, if it's me that you in particular want to have a conversation with, you can get to me through my website, which is www.TalentC. So the word talent with the letter C on the end.ca. You can also reach out to me through LinkedIn and just direct message me on LinkedIn. And I'm fairly easy to find. I'm fairly active on LinkedIn, so I should pop up relatively easy. Having said that, if email is your path of choice, then you can reach me at doug.lawrence, LAWRENCE, at TalentC. So the word talent, letter C on the end.ca, and I'll get back to you as quickly as I can.
Thank you so much, Doug. Another wonderful show, this one and the one before. Please do go over to our YouTube channel and check out both of the shows and also the playlist. We really would appreciate it. All right, we are signing off for now. Our next show is coming up. It's Women in Business. So we'll be talking about all things related to our guest and what our guest is doing. So thanks again. Thanks, Doug. Bye, everyone.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.